why is sales still broken? Because if you're a highly entrepreneurial individual in an organization like both of you are, and you're trying to make a difference, and your traditional sales manager is not going to hear it. They're going to be very old school in their thinking. So why is sales like that? And how do we fix it?
I think this is what we could talk about for the next 90 minutes.
Yeah, I know we can. So that's why I wanted to tee it up.
So a couple thoughts, Amy, past you. I think one of the things, I've realized this in my line of thinking as of late, that when I talk about sales and kind of I'm the least defensible person on the planet, but I do get a tiny bit offended when somebody says it's sales, how hard can it be? And for those of us, who have been in it, who have been in enterprise sales, who've just been in sales in general and done it really well, holy moly, is it complex, right? And there are 1,000 different decisions that you make every day that impact your make or break, right? How you write an email, how you structure something, how you actually sell when you're presenting a proposal, all that goes into it. I think one of the reasons the sales is broken is because people think, I can do it, anyone can do it. And to be fair, anyone can do it. You can learn how to do sales. There's not a whole certification. You don't have to go to med school for it. You can fall into it and take your innate qualities. But I think that we also think that anybody can do it. So then we don't know how to do it correctly. We learn from, plenty of leaders who've been promoted incorrectly. And gosh, Amy, you can probably talk about that forever. The little Peter principle there. But we follow leaders that also don't know how to do it. And so we've got that first starter. I think the other thing where things are really broken and where I love to focus a lot of my time is the foundations of selling. We don't really think about, let's make sure we've got our organizational house in order before we start to think about, we're going to bring in 17 different technologies and build this incredible tech stack and, do all the latest hacks and tricks and things like that and go into enterprise selling for the first time. Slow your roll and really think about, do you have your foundations in place? Do you have a sales process identified? Do you know what the script is, so to speak, on your very first call? Do we know what happens after you send out a proposal? Do you have these things identified first and foremost? And are you coaching your reps to really be human, to be authentic salespeople? Do they know how to write a great email? Do they know what to say correctly in an objection? Make sure that at the most basic level, you've got this, and then you build. I think that the best analogy I can give to this, it's that sales leaders are like, we're going to renovate our master bath on the second floor. And you're like, that's amazing. Your foundation is cracked and your home is sinking. And they're like, that's okay. We'll renovate anyway. And you're like, okay. So I think fix the foundation. Let's make sure that the house is standing and is in good shape. And then let's build upon that.
Go ahead, Amy. I wanted to get your opinion on this as well, because I think it's a huge pain point in the industry.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think as with anything, so we're talking about the foundation, but then I think bigger than that, it starts from the top down and expectations and leadership. And what I notice is, so I'll give you a perfect example. Not all businesses, not all people are created equal, yet we're treating it as such. And sales and recruiting, I firmly believe it starts always with the people that you bring on and the expectations and how you enable them and support them. But beyond that, it's like, in my mind, when I think about this, it's not a one size fits all. It's not one dimensional, but yet we treat it this way in so many people. So like for me, for years, I've been in sales leadership and I've been in individual contribution. I made the conscious decision, and on more than one occasion, I did not want to be a leader for that company. I just didn't. And it was like, well, what do we do with you? Because when you're really good at what you do, it's like, well, what's next? And I think that people are just thrown into sales leadership that have no business being in leadership, that don't really want to be a leader. They like the ego, they like the accolades, they like the title. But the fundamental piece about leadership in my mind is all about your people. And those are the folks that tend to just regurgitate crap. Or what worked for me as a seller should automatically work for everybody else. And I'm going to disrupt the entire team to put together some sort of expectation, or this is how it needs to be done because it's my way. These are the broken bits and pieces. And so I think it comes down to leadership. I think that there is this world that we're living in where, and I don't have any beef with them whatsoever, but when predictable revenue was written, people have taken that model and they've totally bastardized it. The fundamentals of what predictable revenue was all about, I totally get that. I'm down with it. I support it. But now you've got this like ripped off plug and play over segmentation of sales, and it has nothing to do with the buyer journey or the customer. And I like to remind people of this all the time. The customer holds the keys always. They're the ones that write the checks, and they're the ones that fuel everything else that happens. But yet we put together this thing that's all about us and what we want in our process, in our motion, and has very little to do with them. And especially when you're going after money, it's like now you're in some multiplier of some expectation of someone else's dime, and it's promoting all the wrong behavior. And so I think all of those things in combination, coupled with everything that Sam just said, and I agree, it is foundational. If you don't have that, nothing else really sticks for the long haul. So it's expectations, it's stop it with the hacking, the shortcuts, the one size fits all mentality, especially for my folks that are like, we crushed it with this high velocity SMB sales model. That's awesome. That's how you entered the market. But just because you did that and just because your product was ready for that, and Sam and I were on a different conversation, doesn't mean that you're enterprise ready. Just because you had one inbound lead from an enterprise customer, how do you know that that's not one of their franchise owners? That has nothing to do with the big decisions made at corporate. There's so much misconception, and especially from a sales leadership perspective, people are hired for the shiny objects. Like, oh, your team, more than 70% of your team hit. You went to President's Club 8 times in a row. You grew the business 200% year over year for 4 years. You're the sales leader that I want. Well, if I'm running enterprise sales and you did that and it was highly transactional SMB, that sales leader is going to have no idea how to lead what I need to do. And the wrong expectations are going to happen. And therein lies the problems, like read, rinse, repeat, read, rinse, repeat. And the minute that we stop reading, rinsing, and repeating, the minute that we start seeing some of these problems get fixed. And that's one of the big things that I encourage my clients when we're going through kickoff and discovery, and I'm talking to them about what they need and why they need it. I am amazed at how many people aren't thinking through these things. And that's the work that I crave to do. It's like, wait, let me help you get out of your own way. I can see this disaster coming from a mile away. Let me help you. So that's a lot that I just unloaded, but all of that, plus Sam, plus so much more that's going to come up, I'm sure, here.
Well, and I think you bring up two good points too, right? And I think, Amy, you're in the same boat from a recruitment perspective of how hard can it be? I've interviewed people before. I've hired people before. I know what I'm looking for. Why is it that I need an expert? Why is it that I need to outsource this, right? And pay a fee to find somebody. But I think it's, again, just taking that shift and thinking that there are experts out there who have this figured out down to a science, because this is their core competency and this is what they do day in and day out. So before you think about hiring somebody on your own, looking maybe for completely misalignment in terms of qualifications, to your exact point there, think about how do you bring in an expert to help you and make sure that you don't make the terribly expensive mistake of hiring the wrong talent, disrupting your team, costing yourself revenue, et cetera. I think the other thing, and this was an expensive mistake that I learned by myself, exactly your point of hiring the wrong caliber person for what you're doing. So when I was searching for one of my enterprise leaders at one point, I ended up hiring an individual who was a kind of VP of sales for a ton of startups, and just incredibly well known in the space in New York, like very big brand. And so I hired her. And what was so shocking to me and such a great learning experience was that I was taking somebody who was accustomed to having the world as their territory and saying, here are 40 accounts, go make it happen. And there was no, maybe a little bit more nicely than that. But there's no idea of like, how do I nurture leads? How do I map out an account? How do I build an account plan? How do I start at the top and weave my way in and multi-thread? Because before it's just like, hey, everybody, we're new and we can do something. And now it's everybody knows our brand, but you need to figure it out with these 40 accounts and make or break. So I think expensive lesson for me to learn as a sales leader and for the organization, and what we could have avoided with having proper talent. So again, just a good thing for our sales leaders to consider.
When it goes back to that one size fits all, and not to pick on your alma mater, and I don't know where it was that this was, but I know that you worked at LinkedIn, and I have this conversation a lot. I go back to HR tech as well, where it'll be an HR tech startup and they're like, we want somebody from LinkedIn because look at their culture and look at their playbooks. And I'm like, do you realize that their playbooks have been set in stone for a really long time? And the person that you're going to take out of that if they've never created that playbook before, they know how to manage to that playbook. They don't know how to create it. So the work that needs to be done at different stages of companies, different kinds of companies, different sizes of teams, right? Like, so you could be in a small company, but the team's really big, or the reverse of that, or you could be at a LinkedIn or a Yahoo or whatever it might be. The work is different. And so there's this lack of understanding of the nuances and the complexities of sales. It isn't just this plug and play thing of here's your patch. I remember when I first started, it was like, here's the yellow pages. I'm like, okay, and yes, I go that far back, but it's like, just go up and do it. And it's like, luckily I did, and I stumbled a lot, but I learned it doesn't have to be that difficult. And what I find is people aren't listening for the differences. And so it's like, well, this is our way of doing it. This is what we know. And what people aren't understanding is, well, you're treating your prospects horribly. Yes, you're force feeding business in. What does your churn look like? What does that look like? And by the way, how many lost opportunities do you have throughout the process? People just want to look at the new logos in, but there's a whole ecosystem of stuff that's happening that's hurting your business that people aren't thinking of. And the right leaders for your business are thinking about all of that. Not just the little bit of, well, we got funding and now we have to throw up 50 new logos, but we'll treat them horribly, shove them in. We're going to churn them in less than 12 months because we don't know what we're doing. We don't have a customer success motion. It is an ecosystem, and all these things are part of it. And sales isn't something that you just do. It affects your buyer, and it sets the stage and tone for what happens next. So, sorry,
Can I ask
Scott.
one question on that? Can I ask?
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's very good. So I was actually originally I was going to ask a sales question. Of course, the whole thing's going to be about sales, but I want to actually ask a people question, because I think as we're sort of unpacking this, a lot of this is, and not so surprisingly, driven by the people that you hire, the people that you bring in. So when you are, everything you're saying makes sense about how it's not a one size fits all, how you have to find the right type of leader, how the leader has not just maybe the operational experience, but actually conceptualizing and ideating and building out that playbook, and then maybe running with it depending on what their background is like. And there's all these different nuances. So is it finding the right person with the right experience, or is it finding the right person with the right personality traits? Because not everything can always be found in experience, because, it's very difficult to find somebody who scaled a startup from 10 to 50 million and then build up that playbook successfully. And then that's the perfect time for that person to pivot into a new role in a company that's doing the exact same thing. Is that an easy person to find, or can it be substituted with some level of competency plus some personality traits that can allow them to understand and build that out, even if they haven't done it before to the same level or the exact same nuance as what you're hiring into?
Yeah. So for me, it goes back to that. It's not a one size fits all. And so that's where my enterprise selling chops come through of discovery. And I think both of those things are important. So like, what are the DNA traits that this person inherently needs to bring to the table? You can't teach somebody to care, right? Like either they do or they don't. What do they care about though? It's what they care about and why they care about it that I'm especially interested in. And I need to listen to my clients of, have we taken the intentional approach to understand, why are we hiring, right? Why is it time now? And and one of the things that I do the most of is cleaning up, right? They've gotten it wrong. They're feeling the pain. Their recruiting process isn't working. They're suffering from all the horrible effects of mishiring. There are lots of lessons to learn there. Let's not repeat those. Let's take a moment and figure that out and connect some of those dots. So a lot of that is going to be, well, why do you think that this is a good time to hire? Why this role? Sometimes I have to tell people, like, you want a VP? You're so early stage. Don't do that, right? That's going to hurt you. So it's understanding the why and then the what, and really diagnosing. There's two different buckets there. What are the things that the person absolutely has to be, has to embody, has to believe in? And then on the flip side, what are the things, the characteristics of the work that they need to do, the work that they've done, how that translates? So I have this conversation with early stage companies all the time where they're like, I want a sales leader that has taken a company from 0 to 50 million 10 times. And I'm like, that person doesn't exist. And if they did, They're working for themselves now, consulting, making a boatload of cash. They don't have to take this role. The work is a grind and they don't want to go through that. So let's talk about your stage, right? What's the work at your stage? Because chances are the person that can get you from 0 to perhaps 5 to 10 million, that's a very, very different leader than the leader that's at 100 million. And it's okay to hire over them if they can't rise to the occasion, but give them an opportunity. These are the things to think about. People aren't thinking like that. So I always tie it back, Scott, to what is the actual work? And then all the other things that you're talking about sort of shake out. I'm a huge fan of the scorecard and using all of that to map it out as to all of this carries weight. Let's think about what weight it carries and let's use this as our guiding force so that we do get it right together, so that it's not just making assumptions or not knowing you've got this heavy hitter in front of you. You don't know how to talk to them. You don't know how to ask them questions. And you read some stupid thing online about these are the top 10 questions to ask a sales leader. You have no idea why you're asking it. You have no idea what they're answering, but it sounds good. So I'm going to hire them. Stop it right now. And if you are doing that with peace and love, please call me because I will help you.
I think you talked about a good word earlier, ecosystem, and I want to say something in using your terminology also, Scott, that I think tends to be a shocker for a lot of business owners and even senior leaders. One size fits all doesn't exist. You also have two types of sales leaders. You have true sales leaders who have been individual contributors. They're the Amy and Sams of the world who have been there and done that, been in the trenches and grinded it out and can actually tell you how to do it. And then you've got operational leaders who probably have sold maybe for a year or two, weren't super successful, but knew all the mechanics and the math of it and could map out a process for how you should, look at your Tableau reports and your Microsoft BIs and all of that and figure out exactly what you need in order to be successful. You need both kinds of leaders in your organization, right? Because you're going to need someone who's going to be able to go to the table with your clients, build rapport, know how to start the call, know how to work the room, know how to actually sell what it is that you're doing. And then you're going to need your operational leaders, right? You can get that in sales operations, but you can also just get that in operational leadership by having that at a different level of the organization too. I think people focus, one, don't have a viewpoint for that. And then two, a lot of people get really excited about the operational people because they're like, oh, data, big data, that's exciting. And that is exciting and that's wonderful. But you also need, especially as frontline managers, the people who are working and coaching your reps, you need leaders who are going to be able to say, this is how you do it. Restructure this email this way, restructure this proposal this way. Let's do a prep call and a dry run before you go and, possibly botch it in front of one of our biggest opportunities ever. So you've got to look for that across the board. And I think that again, the focus on data and operations is great and is important, but again, making sure that you have a balance between your leaders who can fill the certain gaps for you. It's like building a baseball team. You're not going to, everybody's a baseball player, everybody's a VP of sales or whatever, but you've got, your umpires, your batters, your third baseman, et cetera. Everybody has a little bit of a different role and a strength that they bring. If you only brought one of those and built your entire team based on that, you wouldn't be successful. Right. I hate sports analogies and great that I just gave you one. But that's
a good analogy. I liked it. Right? I've never heard that, but it's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. It's very good. Everyone's a baseball player, but you got to find the right position.